Masechet Moed Katan Daf Chet. We're going to see many interesting cases today. The common denominator is that Chol Moed is supposed to be a happy time when you're concentrating on the holiday itself, and therefore we should not be distracted, not with something happy like a wedding. We'll see at the end, and also which is happy, but we want to concentrate on the holiday, and also not something sad. And we'll see example of burial. But we are starting off, continuing with the idea we saw on the previous stuff, which is if someone healthy sees a discoloration of the skin that may be sara'at, they need not go to the Kohen on the holiday, who is, who may tell him that it's sarat, and then that'll be bad news. Rather, he can delay it till after. And in some cases, even if he has sarat already, but is not sure if what it is, he has something and it's still awaiting being examined, he can delay it till afterwards. Okay, so within that discussion, we mentioned, how do we know that a Kohen can say, just close for today, sorry, not seeing anyone, and you're allowed to delay examination of a sarat till a more convenient time? And we quoted pasuk, Amar Moed, yesh yom she'ata ro'eh bo, v'yesh yom she'ata ro'eh bo. Right, we learned from actually this pasuk here that says ubeyom. And so now we want to understand, how exactly does this pasuk 14 mean that there are some days that you examine and some days you don't? So that's our question. My mashma, how does this pasuk mean it? Amar Abaye, im ken lichtov rachamana beyom, mai ubeyom, shma mina yesh yom she'ata ro'eh bo v'yesh yom she'ata ro'eh bo. Abaye said, really, you could have written beyom without a vav. So why does it have an extra vav? To teach me that there are some days that the Kohen will examine, and some days when he will not examine. Come back later and you're okay until then. The context, by the way, is about someone who has this sarat all over his body, has something all over his body. If it's everywhere, then actually, ironically, he's tahor. But then when he gets some regular non-discolored flesh appearing, that's it. Ubiyom heraut bo basar chai yitma. When he has healthy flesh, some healthy flesh, then he actually becomes tameh. So that's the original context. So we're taking a little bit out of context to say when on a day that the Kohen sees it. So it could have said beyom. Ubiyom means some days, not all days. That's Abaye. Rava amar kula kira yeterahu im ken nichtov rechamana ubeheraot mai ubiyom. And Rava says not only the extra vav is extra, the whole word is extra, because it could have just said ubeheraot. Why beyom? You don't need the whole word at all. Whenever it will be seen. So in other words, this is, from the vav, it's not really clear what that vav means. So Rava prefers to say the whole day. Adding a word a day means on a day in which it is seen. So there are some days that are seen. There are some days when the Kohen will not see anything. All right, that's the derivations. Now we're going to bounce each one off the other. So Abaye, what does he do with the word beyom? Right? How would he answer Rava? He would say, no, I need the word beyom velo balayla, to teach me that a Kohen can examine spots during the day with sunlight when he can see better, and not at night when he's going to just have to use a lamp or a fire, which is not as good. Now Rava agrees with that. So where is he going to derive it from? Bayom velo balayla minale, since he uses the whole word biyom to teach me the original law that some days yes and some days no. How does he know that not at night? Another pasuk that says that's according to what the Kohen's eyes can see. So that means he has to be able to see it well. And the careful examination that's going to have to be done during the day, not at night. Okay, Abaye. So Abaye, what do you do with that pasuk? This comes to exclude a Kohen who can see only out of one eye is not qualified. You need two eyes. He has to see, the depth of the color and the depth of the skin, and so with one eye will not be able to see as well, and so he says "aineh" here in plural. Okay, doesn't he also need this pasuk to teach the same thing? They agree that he has to be sighted with two eyes. You're right. Rava does need this pasuk, so forget this pasuk. Rava cannot use it to learn day and not night. So what other pasuk is available for him to use? Nafkale mi kenega nir'a li babayit li velo leori. When a homeowner sees something that looks like a plague in the house, some kind of a mold, he comes to the Kohen and says, something looks like a sarat in my house. He's not an expert and he's not a Kohen, so he can't determine it himself. But the point here is that nir'a li, I see it is seen by me, meaning with natural light, but not by the way of artificial light, because otherwise we have to him. He has to see it directly, and directly means with daylight. And that's how we'll learn it. That's how Rava will learn it. Okay. Abaye says, if I only had that pasuk, I would say maybe that's true that I need daylight only regarding a building, a home, a wall, because it's not a body, and so for that I would need sunlight to really see the whole room illuminated. But I wouldn't know. I might think perhaps that of a skin disease on the body, maybe a lamp would be fine. I could just look at it carefully with the lamp and it would be sufficient. So that's why I need that original pasuk to say bayom to teach me that day and not night. Whereas Rava says, no, I can learn the whole thing from this. There's no difference between something that'll be a wall or skin on one's body. And there you go. They actually all agree on the halacha, just different ways to derive these laws. All right, and that concludes the case of sarat examination on Chol HaMoed, which we're going to push off till after, so that we won't be sad that we have to be in quarantine on the holiday. And now we get to the next one. It says one is allowed to gather the bones of his father or mother because that is a happy day. Okay, we have to explain. The burial practices back then were different than today. They would generally take a body and put it in kind of a cave or catacomb on a shelf. And then the body would decompose, and then the family members would come back a year later when it was just a skeleton. They would gather the bones together and put the bones in a smaller jar, and then move that jar elsewhere, perhaps in the same cave or another one where it would be collected and put together nearby the other relatives. So the person is like literally gathered unto his nation or gathered unto his forefathers. And so this is a happy day. I mean, I'm sure there's some sadness also to it, that you remember persons remembering their loved one passing away. But nevertheless, it's a sense of closure. It'd be equivalent today of an unveiling, putting up the tombstone, which also is a sense of closure, a sense of finality, satisfaction that one is able to do this honor for their parent or for their loved one. And so, therefore, if that is the time that it ends up being, one is allowed on Chol HaMoed to go and gather the bones. All right, that's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Evel hu lo. Rabbi Yosef says, no, it's a time of mourning. You're going to think about, now I wasn't thinking about it so much, but now I have to go and see the bones and the skeleton and bring up all kinds of memories. And so it's actually going to be a day of mourning for him. And in fact, on that day, he actually has to practice the laws of mourning, similar to when the person originally died. So it is not appropriate to do on Chol HaMoed. Okay, so very interesting. Machloket here. And furthermore, a person should not arouse lamentation. In those days, they would hire professional lamenters, professional eulogizers to bring eulogies and bring everybody to a state of crying and mourning. and also to deliver eulogies himself. Before the also, Yored would also be like hiring wailers and things like that they did back then. And they shouldn't do that 30 days before the holiday when everyone's going to go up to pilgrimage. The Gemara will explain the reason for that. All right. Minhu. Now we have a challenge to the Bimeir. Bimeir says you're allowed to gather bones. It's a happy day. Really? Hamelaket. Minhu hamelaket asmot aviv imo. Hareze mitabel alehem kol hayom vela'areb en mitabel alehen. We have a baraita that says the day on which one reburies or gathers the bones of his father or mother, he actually is in a state of mourning. Doesn't wear leather shoes and all that during the day, but it only lasts one day. Unlike when the person dies, that's a 7-day mourning period. This is only a day, and that's it. After sunset, he is no longer in mourning. And so you see, it's a sad time. Just a note about that. Even if the bones are bundled in a sheet, it seems to be saying that even if he does not reinter the bones totally, even if he didn't put them in the jar and put them back in the cave, but rather gathered them into a cloth, nevertheless he still practices the mourning for that day, and then that's it, not the end of the day. Although there's multiple explanations for this line. Okay, but in any case, the point of here is that it is a day of mourning. Abaye says, no, nevertheless, even though it's true, he's practicing the rituals of mourning, nevertheless, because it is the holiday, the joy of the holiday will overpower the sadness that's associated with interring with gathering the bones. And so therefore, yes, even though he's not wearing shoes and all that, it's still permitted on Chol HaMoed. Okay, not to arouse lamentations for people to cry within 30 days. What does that mean? He gives an example in the West, in Eretz Israel, that a practice of hiring these professional eulogizers, and then they would go around and say, let all those who have a bitter heart come and weep with him. In other words, he'd rouse up everybody who had a loss recently, everyone who was mourning about whatever it is, to think about all the things that you've lost and all the terrible tragedies and all that, and everybody would start crying. So this is not appropriate to do 30 days before the holiday. It's going to ruin our mood. We're trying to get into the mood of joy even beforehand. Good. Now 30 days. Why 30 days? How about a few days, 1 week, 2 weeks? What's special about this? We're going to have two opinions, and the first one is a story. One time was a man who saved up money so that he could take a trip to Yerushalayim for Pesach or for Sukkot. But then one of these professional eulogizers came to his home, and he offered a eulogy for someone who passed away sometime recently. And so his wife was very moved by this eulogy, and she went and took all the savings and gave it to him to pay for it. And since now he had no money to pay for his trip, he didn't go to Yerushalayim for the holiday. And then when that happened, the rabbis got together and they made a decree: a person should not hire anyone to bring people to cry or to make a eulogy 30 days before. Okay, so this would be a very practical reason, just a matter of paying for it. And now we have a second reason. This is more of a psychological reason, that a person, the dead will not be forgotten. Even let's say they died before, but now you have a memorial service, 15, 20 days before the holiday, now it gets you back in the mode of mourning and sadness, and that's going to stick with you for 30 days. And so therefore, if you do before 30 days, well, you have to find some time to do it, but then 30 days, that's it. Now start getting into a good mood to get ready for the holiday. Okay, so both seem like good reasons. What might my benai? Who will be a practical difference between the two? If there is a eulogizer who does it for free, then we wouldn't have to worry about the story that we mentioned before, right? He's not going to spend money on that, and that way he'll be able to save up and spend money on making an aliyah trip. But the second one of that he's going to be in a sad mood will apply nevertheless. Okay, in halakha, there's a lot of discussion about this, about if a person passes away within 2 months before the holiday, then yes, they can make speeches, memorial service, eulogies within. But the prohibition applies when a person dies before that, and so then there's no, you should schedule the eulogies to be before 30 days and not impinge on the joy of the holiday. Okay, more about burial practices. And chofrin kuchin ukbarot b'moed. One may not dig crypts or graves on the holiday. So here's an example of a crypt. This would be like underground, and so there would be these different holes, these crypts here that each would hold a body. And here one like that would be in the sarcophagus, and other things that are kevarot. That would be different. That again, I was going to explain. That's actually above ground, like a mausoleum. So you can't do that. You can't dig these on Chol HaMoed. It requires a lot of exertion, and so not appropriate. But what you can do is adjust it. I'll explain. Adjust it for size. If it's too short, you can dig it out to make it bigger. Also, you can make a pond. What is this pond for? The common explanation is it's a laundry pond. Even though you can't do laundry on Chol HaMoed, in most cases, in some cases you can, so you may need to do that. So that would also require digging. That's what it has in common here. Others say it's actually a pond for cleaning, for purifying, cleaning the bodies, the body that died. So that would, according to that, it would fit into the same theme as the rest of them. Is this Mishnah? Anyway, it requires digging. Also, to build a coffin. This is what you can do, right? So you cannot do these big digging projects, make a new one, but you can fix up one that's already there. You can make a little pond. That's a small amount of digging, and you can make a coffin as long as the dead body is there in the courtyard with you. Because then anyone passing by says, "Oh, look, he has to bury someone. That's why he's building. That's why we hear this hammer is going." If there's nobody there, then it's like, what's this guy doing? Was he making shelves? On Chol HaMoed, he shouldn't be doing that extra work. Rabbi Yehuda said, "Elam ken yesh imon nesarim." Rabbi Yehuda says, "No, you're not allowed to build a coffin, even if the body is there with you, unless you already have boards prepared. You already have some plywood. But if you have to go and actually go and cut the plywood, prepare the plywood, then that is way too much work." So he's a little bit more stringent and requires that to have the materials ready as well. Okay, Gemara is going to explain my kuchin and my kevarot. What does these refer to? A crypt is when you're digging down. Ukvarot bebinyan. A kever is a mausoleum, a building that's constructed above ground. Tanya nemehachi elohen hakuchin ve'elohen kevarot kuchin b'chafira. What bebinyan? A braita that says that very same thing. What you can do is adjust crypts that are already there, and you can do that on Chol HaMoed because that's less work. If it's too long than needed, then you can shorten it. You fill in with some dirt or some rocks to make it nice and snug and cozy. It's going to be there for a while. Or Braita explains that he lengthens it or widens it. If the person is very tall or very wide, then he would need more room, and so you can dig that out. Ve'osin nibrechet, you make this pool. My nibrechet, zo bakia, another word for pool. V'atanya nibrechet bakia. We have a braita that talks about two things, a nibrechet and bakia. If it's the same thing, why would you say a pool and a pool? Oh, it means different size pools, a big one and a small one. Both of these would be permitted either for laundering or for washing the body or the shrouds. And you can build a coffin as long as the body is there with you in the courtyard. Oh, we actually have another braita that says the same thing as what we just learned in the Mishnah. We can do anything that is needed for the sake of the corpse. So if the hair is very long, you can make to disheveled. You can give it a haircut. You can wash the burial shrouds, and you can make a coffin out of boards that had already been cut and prepared before Yom Tov. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is more lenient, and he says you can even bring trees, and you can cut them into boards as long as you do it discreetly in your home. And since it's Chol Moed, so we don't want to work in a regular way. So do it in a quiet way, so that it won't ruin the happiness of the holiday. All right, and next Mishnah, en nosin nashin b'moed. Very often there are parallel laws between funerals and weddings. And here, this is yet another example of it. One is not allowed to marry women on a holiday, not on Yom Tov, not on Chol HaMoed. Lo betulot velo almanot velo meyabemin ipnei shesimcha hi lo, and gives three cases in ascending order: not someone who will be a first marriage, that's the happiest, and not of a widow, where it's also happy but a little bit less, and not yibum, if someone dies without children, then the brother marries the wife, the widow. So that is like even less happy. They weren't even planning on doing this, and so they're performing a mitzvah. So it's a little bit happy, but nevertheless, even though it's only a little bit happy, nevertheless it's not allowed because it's the holiday. One thing you are allowed to do is if a couple got divorced and then sometime later they say, you know what, that was a mistake, we should not have, assuming that he's not a Kohen, then they can get remarried because they're just going back into the marriage that they were in before. So yeah, it is happy, but not, it's a much smaller wedding in that case. A woman can prepare her makeup and jewelry on the holiday. That's fine. Be on Chol HaMoed. Yeah, she can do everything except put a lime mask on her skin, because while she's wearing the lime mask, she looks like a clown, and so that is a disgrace. So that you should not do, because maybe she looks better after, but during that time she doesn't look good. So that's not good for that's going to cause distress on the holiday. If someone needs to just sew something up. So if he's a regular person, not a tailor, so he can sew something up, a button fell off, or he needs some stitches. But if he's a professional tailor, then he cannot, because then he's doing his work, and you can't do work. He can only put temporary type of stitch during Chol HaMoed and then go back and fix it later. You can weave together a bed. In those days, the beds weren't resting on bed springs, but rather was attached to a frame by weaving. And so that is that one can do. And the BO says no, don't put it in place in the first instance, but rather you can tighten it if it's already there. Okay, and all these are different types of work, appropriate or not appropriate. It's okay. Now, question about weddings. So what if it's happy? It's supposed to be it's a holiday anyway, so why not have a wedding on the holiday? אמר רבי יהודה אמר שמואל, וכן אמר רבי אלעזר אמר רבי הושעיה, אמר רבי אלעזר אמר רבי חנינא. לפי שאין מערבין שמחה בשמחה is a famous statement because we cannot mix together one joy with another. Or similarly, the same idea, in other words, Rabba bar Rav Huna amar, mipnei shemaniach simchat haregel, v'osek v'simchat ishto. Person is going to forget about the rejoicing of the holiday, right? He says, what is this? So Sukkot? Why? Not going to be concentrating on the reason why you're celebrating Sukkot or Pesach. He said, you're only going to be concentrating on the wedding, and so therefore, it's very hard to celebrate two different things at once, right? It's like someone comes to a wedding and then they announce that they're getting engaged at the wedding. You're taking away the thunder from the bride, right? Each thing should be celebrated separately. Amar le Abaye Rav Yosef had Rabba bar Rav Huna de Ravhu. So Abaye tells Rav Yosef that this reason that we read is actually was originally said by Rav, right? This statement here, because he's going to forget about the holiday and only do the wedding. It came from Rav, who said, "Minayin she'en nosin nashim b'moed shenemar v'samachta b'chagecha velo b'ishtecha." Okay, he derived it from pasuk and it says you should be happy for the holiday. Yeah, you should be happy for the holiday and not for your wife, right? And if you're making a wedding, then you're just going to be thinking about the joy of marrying your wife and not about the holiday. Ula amar torach. It's because of the tremendous amount of work making a wedding, right? Ask anyone how much work it is, and so you're not going to enjoy the holiday because you're thinking about the flowers and the DJ and all that. Rabbi Yitzchak says another reason altogether, which is that if we allow people to make weddings on the holiday, then everybody's going to wait to get married on the holiday, because then it's easier since we're all getting together anyway, we're having a big meal together. So I don't have to bother paying also for a wedding because we're already making a big get together and a big festive meal. And then people would not get married during the year. They would push off their weddings to be on the Chagim. And then if they push off their weddings for those weeks and months, then they will not be performing Pidei Avdei and not having children all this time by delaying these weddings. And that's why we don't like to delay weddings and actually don't allow it on the Chag, just so that people will get married all year round. Interesting reason. Now we're challenged. It's a challenge to all of the different opinions here before. And we just said, but nevertheless, you are allowed to marry on the eve. In other words, right before, the day before, the afternoon before the Chag starts, you can do a wedding then. In fact, it was somewhat common to make weddings on Friday afternoons, right, or Erev Chag, and that way you finish the ceremony, and then you'd go into the celebration, and the celebration would also be the Shabbat or Chag meal. And so Kashya Lekuru is a challenge to all of them, because now you are actually making the celebration overlap with the holiday, even though the ceremony was technically before. So, like Kashya, we're going to answer the question for everybody. According to the first 2-3 opinions, I said because of the happiness, really the primary essence of joy is the first day. It's at the wedding, a ceremony itself. People are really happy. Okay, and then they'll go into the night and celebrate that big meal. But then the rest of it is Sheva Barachot. Sheva Barachot are happy, but they're not as joyous as the wedding itself. And therefore, since it only impinge on the first day, that's okay, as long as it's not impinging on the rest of the days. Whereas if you're allowed every day, then every night there's going to be a wedding. And it's going to just wedding season, and you're going to forget that it's even Pesach or Shavuot or Sukkot. According to the opinion that says because you're working too much to prepare for the wedding and can't concentrate on the holiday, that also you have to do a lot of work to prepare for the wedding itself, right? For the Sheva Barachot after, that doesn't take so much organization. right? That's like much more relaxed and compared. So therefore, all the work to prepare for the wedding you'll do before the holiday, and then for the Sheva Berachot, not so much work, and you can enjoy the holiday too. And according to the one that said people will not make weddings all year round because the way to do it on the holiday. Oh, if there's only one day available, that's only a very small window of opportunity. How many weddings can you schedule on the same day, right? The person already booked that hall, then this hall, and so a person's not going to say, "Oh, I'll just wait till that one day in 6 months." What if something goes wrong that one day, and then what? So if you allow the whole holiday to have weddings every night, then everybody will just do it then. If there's only one day, then people are going to say, "No, I'm not going to wait till then. I'll make the wedding whenever is appropriate," and that way people will not delay in the mitzvah of Pirya Verivya. So really interesting how Chol HaMoed, on the one hand, we don't want people to be depressed and sad, but we also don't want people to be too happy for other reasons, as good as those reasons are, but rather the holiday should be celebrated in and of itself. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.